Good evening and welcome to Sports Talk on a Budget. It is Wednesday, July 17th, year of our Lord 2023. Before I get into the show, just want to remind you, if you like the audio version, you can find this podcast under Sports Talk on a Budget on places like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify, and basically wherever you get your podcasts. But also, if you prefer the video version, like and subscribe to the show right down here. Leave a comment if you'd like on YouTube. This is a video on YouTube under Sports Talk on a Budget. Do these basically weekly. We'll start to do these even more frequently now that football season is right around the corner. And that is what this show is going to be about today. Like I mentioned at the end of my show last week, going to do kind of a special segments here in the month of July and in early August as well. Going to break down each week. I'm going to break down two divisions in the NFL and a conference in college football, give a little bit of a preview, answer some burning questions. So this show today is going to be the East, both the AFC East and the NFC East, both preview and breakdown, answer some questions from each team. And then I will get to the SEC in college football. So without further ado, those are my topics today. Let's go ahead and dive into the show. So as I mentioned, we're going to start in the NFL. We're going to start in the East with the two East divisions. We're going to start in the AFC East and have some burning questions for each team in the AFC East. Just a little bit of a preview. The Buffalo Bills have won this division the last 4 years and are currently the betting favorite in Vegas to win this division as well, with the Dolphins right behind them and the Jets not too far behind the Bills and the Dolphins, and then my Patriots, unfortunately, kind of a distant fourth. But first, we're going to start off with the Buffalo Bills. I think the biggest question for the Buffalo Bills this year is replacing players. Not only are you replacing players on the defensive side like Jordan Poyer and Matt Milano, but you're also going to be replacing your best receiver and Josh Allen's best weapon in his career, and that is Stephon Diggs. And who's going to be doing that? Is it going to be guys, and you also lose Gabe Davis, so that's another weapon. But who is going to be that replacement for Stephon Diggs? Is it going to be your first-round pick, wide receiver Keon Coleman out of Florida State? Is it going to be a guy like Khalil Shakir that came on late for them last year? Who is going to be that guy to take on the mantle to be the number one wide receiver for Josh Allen in this offense? I think they're going to want to run the ball a lot with James Cook and be more of a run-centric team, running it with James Cook and maybe running it a little bit less with Josh Allen, but that ends up being their best offense sometimes is running with Josh Allen, even though I think they should probably pull the reins back on that a little bit. But that is kind of my biggest question and what I think about the Buffalo Bills. Like I said, this team has won the last 4 division titles, and this is not a prediction episode. I'll get to that later with my NFL preview in late August and early September. So I'm not going to pick who's going to win this division, but the Buffalo Bills, like I said, biggest question mark is replacing players. Jordan Poyer was a big part of your defense, and then, of course, Stephon Diggs was a big part of your offense, and now you got to replace both of those guys. You're a team that is supposed to have Super Bowl aspirations. I don't know if they're a Super Bowl team right now. I'll get into that a little bit more in my NFL preview, but you're a team that is supposed to have Super Bowl aspirations. You have an elite quarterback in Josh Allen in his prime. Do you have the weapons and the team around Josh Allen to really get to those heights that you think you should be? That is my big question mark there. We'll move to the next team here, and that is going to be the New York Jets. And the New York Jets last offseason and this offseason have garnered a lot of attention and a lot of noise. And of course, that's going to be because of last season's offseason acquisition of quarterback Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers played 4 plays last year. They still managed to win 7 games. The consensus is they'll build upon that. They can get to 9-10 wins. I'm not sure if I believe that. Yes, they had terrible quarterback play last year. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is a giant upgrade over Zach Wilson. But the major issues that they had on this team last year was mainly on the offensive line. You sort of address those. You get Tyron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys. Tyron Smith is a guy who averages about 10 to 12 games that he plays in the last 3 years. He was an all-pro, great offensive tackle early on in the middle of his career for the Dallas Cowboys. He is still a very good player when he's healthy, but that is the key for Tyron Smith, when he's healthy. And I'm just not sure if he is going to be healthy all year. And with the 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury in Aaron Rodgers, you're going to need a healthy offensive line. You get some other pieces, kind of some other cast-offs from from the Baltimore Ravens. Your first pick was Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State. I was a fan of Olu Fashanu going into the draft, but he was one of those guys. He wasn't like the tackle from Notre Dame, Joe Alt, and some of the other tackles that were in the first round of the NFL draft who were ready, I think, to start day one. I think Olu Fashanu's ceiling as an offensive tackle may be higher than guys like a Joe Alt or a J.C. Latham, guys like that who might be ready to step in and start right away. But I just don't know if he's ready to step in and start right away. He's probably going to start at right tackle, even though he has more experience in the college game at Penn State at left tackle. And then is he going to move to left tackle when Tyron Smith inevitably misses a game or misses some starts? So question marks on the offensive line are still there. And I really think this skill position group for the New York Jets is a little overstated. You signed Mike Williams in the offseason from the Chargers. Mike Williams has the same issues that Tyron Smith does. He can't stay healthy. And he averages less games in the last 3 years than Tyron Smith does. Breece Hall, I think, is one of the 7 to 8 best running backs in the league. I think the latest poll that they did with executives around the league had him at number 2. That's way too high for me. But either way, he's probably about 6 to 8 running back in this league. Garrett Wilson, he is their number 1 wide receiver. He wouldn't be a number 1 wide receiver on probably half the teams in the NFL. So he's a good but not great player. You still don't have a great tight end. They're gonna play good defense, but I question the offensive line. I think the skill position players are a little overstated at this point, and I question the overall seriousness of this team because it's always been a circus ever since Aaron Rodgers stepped in the building. It's been kind of just controversy and just topics week after week, day after day. How serious is this team? How good of a coach is Robert Saleh? Nathaniel Hackett, they were looking for his replacement in the offseason. He's only there because of Aaron Rodgers. So were a lot of players last year. So how serious is this Jets team? And are they kind of like the Clippers and things like that in the NBA where they just can't get out of their own way? I think that's kind of the way with the Jets. I don't have high expectations for this team. I think they're a fringe playoff team at best. People picking them with confidence to win the AFC East, I think, are nuts. Then we'll go to the next team in the AFC East, and that is going to be the Miami Dolphins. And the Miami Dolphins are kind of stuck right there in the middle. They can go one of two ways. They can go up and ascend to be one of the top-level teams in the AFC, or they can go down and be a team that maybe misses the playoffs or has to kind of scratch their way to get into the playoffs. Those are the only direction because right now they're a middle of the pack. They're a playoff wildcard team, but they haven't been anything more, and they haven't been anything less in the last 2 seasons. Do they take that next step? Are they poised to take that next step? They still haven't signed Tua Tagovailoa to a contract extension. I don't think that's actually going to happen before the season starts. I think they're going to kind of roll the dice with Tua. He's had the injury history. He's been very inconsistent. He basically does not play well in games that are like 45 degrees, which is crazy because you play in the AFC East where the 3 other teams in your division, you're going to be playing in cold weather when you play them after October, basically. So that is another question mark there. You have weapons all over the place with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert. That's not an issue. The defense, there's some question marks there. You lose Christian Wilkins, who is kind of the heart and soul of your defense. You lose Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator. What's their defense going to look like when you play just the elite quarterbacks that make up the AFC? So that's a big question mark there. But does this Miami team take the next step and get to that upper echelon in the AFC, or do they go in the other direction and end up becoming a team that either has to fight and scratch to get in the playoffs, or a team that just isn't a playoff team, is a good team but isn't a great team? Because that's where they're at right now. And if you had to ask me today, I probably would lean they take a step back, but we'll get into that a little bit more, like I said, in my NFL preview show in late August, early September. And anything can happen in the season as well. This division is a little bit more wide open than it has been in these past seasons with the Buffalo Bills dominating. And last but not least are my New England Patriots. And with my New England Patriots, I'm just hopeful for a better season than there was and some progress. First season in over 20 years without Bill Belichick as the head coach. Gerard Mayo as the head coach. What does that look like under Gerard Mayo? How long does it take for Drake May to get out there on the field? Does Jacoby Brissett play the first month? Does he play the first couple of months? Does he play most of the season before Drake May comes in? That's a big question mark there. And yes, the Patriots have not been a good offensive team ever since Tom Brady left the building, and they weren't really a great offensive team in Tom Brady's last season with the New England Patriots. But what they've always been able to hang their hat on is defense and how good they could play on the defensive side. You have one of the best defensive coordinators in NFL history, one of the best defensive minds in NFL history in Bill Belichick. Can they continue that defensive play under Jerod Mayo, under a new voice? He's a guy who has been there. He was the linebackers coach, and then, of course, he was the linebacker there under Bill Belichick for a while as well. So he is a familiar voice in that locker room, but can he continue that defensive performance that they've had, even though they haven't been good on the offensive end under Bill Belichick? That's a huge question mark there. So that was just kind of my breakdown of the AFC East. Some of the major question marks I have for each team and what to sort of expect for each team going forward as well. Next, we're going to move to the NFC East. And in the NFC East, we're going to start with the reigning defending NFC East champions, and that is going to be the Dallas Cowboys. I think there's a lot of question marks for the Dallas Cowboys coming into the season. One of the question marks is, can they repeat as division champions? That just doesn't happen in this division. There's usually a new division champion almost every year. It's very rare that a team goes back to back. I think it's been since like the mid 2000s since the team has gone back to back division championships in this division. So it's not something that happens a lot. And there's just a ton of question marks for the Cowboys heading into the season. You didn't extend Dak Prescott, so he's going to be playing on the last year of his contract. You didn't extend Mike McCarthy, so he's going to be coaching on the last year of his contract. You didn't extend CeeDee Lamb. You didn't extend Micah Parsons. So your three best players and your head coach are all playing on their last year, or sort of not the last years of their contract for all of them, but are playing at the end of their contracts and wanting new contracts. How is that going to play in the locker room? I can't imagine that plays well in the locker room. So a lot of question marks there. Is this team good enough on the offensive side outside of Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb? Are they good enough? Can guys like Brandon Cooks, can Ferguson take a next step? How good is their offensive line going to be? Who's going to be running the ball for them? They re-sign, they bring back Ezekiel Elliott, whatever's left of him. He had an okay season last year for the Patriots. You have Rico Dowdy. You have Deuce Vaughn. Who is going to be your main running back? And so I don't know if they're a team that's going to repeat. That'll be something I'll get into in the NFL preview, but a lot of question marks surrounding the Dallas Cowboys. This is a big year because we could be looking at this team next year with a new quarterback and a new head coach heading into the 2025 season. So this could be a very big year for the Dallas Cowboys, and it's always big in Dallas. We're going on almost 30 years since they've made an NFC championship game. Can they finally get the monkey off their back and get to the NFC championship game? Then we'll move to the Philadelphia Eagles, the team who currently is the odds-on favorite to win this division. And Philadelphia, in the last 6 weeks in the first round of the playoffs last year, was one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the NFL last year. And statistically, there's a lot of statistics that show that they were the worst team in the NFL down the stretch last year in the regular season. Can they get back on track? You hire a new defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio. You hire a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. Nick Sirianni is kind of taken off. He's going to be more of a CEO head coach. You bring in Saquon Barkley. You lose Jason Kelce, though, the heart and soul of your team, and obviously on that offensive line. Still should be a very good offensive line with guys like Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, the other offensive lineman they have there. So still should be a very good offensive line. Defense still has some question marks both in the secondary and up front. You lose Hassan Reddick up front to the New York Jets. So some question marks there. I think this offense can be explosive. I think they can get back on track. I think Saquon Barkley's really going to feast in this offense. You still have a great wide receiver tandem in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. You still have a good tight end in Dallas Goedert as well. So I think they'll be able to score the football and move the football. I don't think that's going to be the issue. I think the issue for the Philadelphia Eagles will be on the defensive side and especially on the defensive front. And then is Nick Sirianni coaching for his job? Like it seems like with Mike McCarthy, it did not end obviously well, as we mentioned earlier, with the season last year with Nick Sirianni as the head coach, of course. Could this be his last year? You have Bill Belichick kind of roaming out there. There was rumors that the Eagles were interested in maybe looking at him if they got rid of Nick Sirianni. They didn't, but does that change a year later since Bill Belichick is still on the market? So some question marks heading to for the Philadelphia Eagles heading into the season. They would probably be my favorite going in, but I'll break that down a little bit more when I get to that preview show in about a month or so. And then we'll go ahead and move to the Washington Commanders. And of course, Washington Commanders' first pick in the draft was the second overall pick, Jane Daniels. You bring in Dan Quinn. You feel like you're heading in the right direction. You finally get Dan Snyder out of the building. That happened before last year, but still that can't be understated there either. This is a team that has the requisite weapons. You bring in Austin Eckler to go with Brian Robinson. You still have guys like Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson on the outside at wide receiver. You still have very good skill position players there. Your defense is a question mark a little bit, especially along your defensive front. They've lost a lot of the big names that they've had along the defensive front. You had a really good draft. I liked a lot of their picks, not just Jaden Daniels. I liked a lot of their picks. Mikey Sanders, the defensive player from Michigan, was a really good pick. The tight end they got out of Kansas State, I thought was a really good pick. So they had a really good draft. And what's progress for this team? Is it 6? Is it 7? Is it 8 wins? Do you contend for a playoff spot? I think that could be a dark horse playoff team in the NFC. NFC is not as deep as the AFC. I really like Jaden Daniels coming out of college. I think he'll fit well in the Cliff Kingsbury offense. He's the new offense coordinator there in Washington. I think he fits well in that offense. And like I said, you have the weapons. You bring in Austin Eckler to add with Brian Robinson on the run at the running back. I think this team could be a dark horse, like I said, playoff team in the NFC. And I think just contending for a playoff spot at the end of the season is a win for Dan Quinn and this team in year one. And I think that's the progress they could make. And then finally, we have the New York Giants. And the New York Giants, to me, are destined to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. You're going into the season. Daniel Jones is coming off an injury. You bring in Drew Lock. I think that's kind of a lose-lose situation. I was never been a Drew Lock fan, never been a Daniel Jones fan. But whoever starts at quarterback for them, outside of the first-round pick rookie Malik Neighbors, who are your other weapons? You lose Saquon Barkley. Who's going to be running the ball for you? I think Devin Singletary is your number one back. That's not scaring anybody. Your offensive line is still a question mark outside of left tackle Andrew Thomas. You have a solid defense. You end up trading for Brian Burns. You put him, kind of bookend him on the end with Kayvon Thibodeau. So you're going to have a good pass rush. But is that the only thing to be excited about for the New York Giants? Is their pass rush? Because there is nothing I could see on the offensive side of the ball for this team to be excited about at all. And like I said, Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau will make some plays and make some noise, but they're going to need to score. They're going to need to score in this division and in obviously in today's NFL. I just don't see them doing this. I think this is the last year of Daniel Jones as a New York Giant. I think they're in the quarterback draft market going into next year because they'll probably end up having a top 5 pick. And what is good enough for the Giants with this outlook for this team for Brian Dable to keep his job? Does he need to at least get 6-7 wins? I don't think that's in the cards for this Giants team. Some people are higher on this Giants team. I don't see it. I don't see where you're higher on outside of the Brian Burns pickup to add him with Kayvon Thibodeau. Outside of that, I don't really know where this Giants team has any kind of momentum or anything to be excited about. So I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and I think they're going to finish a pretty decent 4th because I think the Commanders have a much better outlook going into the season than the New York Giants do. That was my NFC East preview there. So just kind of break down. Wanted to go over some of the top question marks for the teams going into the season. Break that down a little bit more when we get into my NFL season preview in about a month. But let's go ahead and transition to college football. We're going to start with, even though I hate to say it, the SEC is the top conference in college football and has been for probably about 15, 20 years at this point. So we'll start with my conference breakdowns in college football with the SEC and my SEC preview here. First thing, you got to start off when you're talking about the SEC. I know they didn't win the SEC last year. They lost in the SEC championship game to Alabama, but they're the favorite. They're probably, if not the best team going into the season in college football, at least one of the top 2, at the very least 3. That is Georgia. And who is going to challenge Georgia in this conference? I think they're the top dog at this conference, no pun intended there. But they're not a perfect team. They're a very good team. You know they're going to play good defense in the Kirby Smart. You bring back Carson Beck, his second year starting. They do have some weapons at wide receiver. They're going to have a good running game. But they're not a team that can't get got. And they have road games against Texas. They're on the road at Texas, at Ole Miss, and Alabama, and then they open the season in Atlanta against Clemson. So their schedule is going to be the toughest schedule maybe that they've had since Kirby Smart's been there. This is going to be by far, I think, the toughest schedule they've had in years. In fact, they've had kind of cupcake schedules the last couple of years. So do they stumble? Do they stumble a couple of times? I think they probably stumble once on the road, whether that be at Texas, Ole Miss, or Alabama. But still, who is going to challenge them? One of the main challengers is still Alabama, even though Nick Saban isn't there. Big question mark there is, can Kalen DeBoer keep Alabama at the top end of college football? And I think he can. He's been an unbelievable coach wherever he's been at, whether it was his Division II days, whether it was at Fresno State, what he did at Washington these last 2 years, taking them all the way to the national championship last year, winning the conference in the Pac-12 in one of the best years for the Pac-12 conference in their last year. So Kalen DeBoer is a guy who knows how to coach and get the best out of his players. I think he's going to be a huge upgrade for Jalen Milroe. I think he's going to help develop Jalen Milroe into a better overall quarterback, a guy who can play from the pocket, not just a running threat and not just a deep throw threat, but can make passes all over the field, whether they're short and intermediate passes. I think this is going to be a godsend for Jalen Milroe, and maybe he is a sneaky Heisman favorite, even though he's like top 3 or 4 in odds right now, so not exactly sneaky Heisman favorite. But I think Kalen DeBoer can keep this train rolling for the Alabama Crimson Tide. It may be a little bit bumpy in this first year. Like I said, you get Georgia at home. You have to travel to Wisconsin, I believe, in week 2 or 3. You still have to play LSU. I don't believe they play Texas this year. Oklahoma comes in. So it's going to be difficult, maybe a little bumpy, maybe a 2-3 loss season. But I think the overall trajectory of this program is going to stay roughly where it's at. Now, you can never take it probably to the heights that Nick Saban took it, because he took it to heights that have never been seen before, even under Paul Bear Bryant way back in the day. But I think Kalen DeBoer can keep this ship going and keep them at the top end of college football as well. And then there's kind of 2 teams that a lot of people are talking about as playoff contenders, and could they even be national championship contenders, but no one really wants to say that. That's Ole Miss and Missouri. 2 teams that finished the season last year very well. 2 teams that would have been in the playoff, I believe, last year if it was a 12-team playoff and not a 4-team playoff. 2 teams heading in the right direction. You got Eli Drinkowitz, the coach of Missouri. Really like what he's doing there. Brady Cook is their returning quarterback. You got Lane Kiffin, of course, the head coach of Ole Miss. Really like what he's doing. He brings back Jackson Dart and just an unbelievable transfer portal haul. He does lose Quinshon Judkins, but they look to be able to reload at the running back position. Can these 2 teams compete for a conference title? That's the biggest question mark. They probably got the 2 best draws, at least Missouri, of the schedule. Probably 2 best draws schedule-wise in the SEC. Both Ole Miss and Missouri did. So they have favorable schedules and schedules that could get them not just to an SEC championship game, but also to a playoff. These are 2 teams I think are still underrated, even though more people are talking about them than ever before. But I think these are 2 teams that can compete to get to the SEC championship game. And hey, anything can happen in the SEC championship game sometimes, as long as Nick Saban's not there, of course. So I think these 2 teams can compete, like I said, for an SEC championship game, and not just for an SEC championship game berth. Compete for the title as well. And then we want to look out on the outside. I think a team that I haven't mentioned yet that is also a team that is going to compete for an SEC championship, and that is Texas. And the question that a lot of people are asking is, can they come in first year in the SEC and win the conference? They can. They definitely can. I don't know if they will. I still like teams like Georgia, maybe even Alabama or Missouri or Ole Miss to be above them. Maybe not that far. Maybe just Georgia right now to be above them, but this Texas team is loaded again. Now, they lost a lot at the receiver spot. You lose 3 guys that go get drafted in the NFL, whether that was Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, and Jordan Whittington. So you lose 3 guys that end up in the NFL. Do you replace them? But you do have Quinn Ewers coming back. Steve Sarkisian is one of the best offensive minds in college football, maybe in football in general at this point. Your defense is getting better and better. Their offensive line is going to be one of the best position groups in the entire SEC, maybe even in the entire in the entire country. So they're going to be able to run the ball well. They're going to block for Quinn Ewers. I'm sure he's going to be able to find. They have a ton of talent at wide receiver, a little bit unproven talent, but guys that they've brought in from either the transfer portal or guys that have been in the program for a couple of years now that are looking to make their hay and looking to step up here. So this is a team that is going to be very, very good, and I think could contend for an SEC championship in year one. I still would have Georgia as a favorite. Then I think next would be between Alabama and Texas for that number 2 spot in the SEC. And the last question for me with this conference is, how deep is this conference? I just mentioned Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Texas. So we got 5 teams so far that I mentioned. It is now a 16-team conference with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas. How deep is this conference? I think you go about 8 teams deep before it kind of falls off. And the next 3 teams I would add to the 5 teams I've already mentioned. One is Tennessee. One is Oklahoma, another team coming in there as well. And then the last team I would probably add is, maybe just 7 teams deep. Maybe just looking back at it, maybe it's more of a 7-team deep league. And then there's a little bit of everybody else at that point. But still, looking at this conference, everybody always talks about the depth of other conferences when they're versus the SEC, and the SEC I think has been a little more. The A team would be LSU. So that's my those are my A teams. Would be LSU would be the A team. I knew it was an obvious team I was missing. My apologies there. So 8 teams deep. A lot of people, like I said, there's been a lot of arguments in past years. No one's arguing that the SEC isn't the best conference, but they haven't always been the deepest conference. It's been a little top heavy in past, whether it's Georgia and Alabama, whether it's Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. Sometimes Auburn sneaks up in there. Sometimes Florida snuck up in there. Tennessee snuck up into there a couple years back with Hendon Hooker. So how deep is this conference? And like I said, I think it goes about 8 teams deep, the first 5 teams that I mentioned. Then you throw in Tennessee, Oklahoma, and LSU. I think all 8 of those teams will be bowl eligible teams. But can those 3 last teams that I mentioned, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and LSU, can they really contend for an SEC title? When it comes to Oklahoma, I think it's a little premature. I think they'll have some issues, and they got a really tough schedule. They didn't get any breaks from the schedule makers in the SEC, so it's going to be tough for them in the first year. So I don't expect them to contend for an SEC title in the first year. LSU, still a lot of question marks on the defensive side. Great defensive staff that they brought in. Brian Baker from Missouri comes in as the defensive coordinator. Great defensive staff they brought in, but they didn't really add a lot of defensive pieces. You have Harold Perkins there, but didn't really add a lot of defensive pieces through the transfer portal. You lose Jaden Daniels. You lose Malik Neighbors. You lose Brian Thomas Jr. So there's a lot of talent that they have to replace there. So a lot of question marks from me. So I don't really see LSU as an SEC championship contender this year. And then finally with Tennessee, it's all about Nico Iamaleava. The sophomore quarterback, the 5-star freshman. He was in the 2023 class. He was a 5-star freshman going in. It's all about, does he become that guy that we all thought he could be coming out of high school? And if he does, Josh Heupel is going to put up a lot of points. They're going to get a lot of yards. So this, I think, out of the 3 teams that I mentioned, kind of after the top 5 teams, I think in this conference, I think the best team that can get out of that last 3 and get into that top 5 and contend for an SEC championship game is going to be Tennessee. They have a stud at defensive end as well. Probably going to be a top 5 pick. I think it would be Tennessee, but they do have to. They play Alabama at home. They go to Oklahoma. They go to Georgia. So it's not going to be an easy schedule. And I think they're more of a playoff contender than an SEC championship contender, but maybe they can make some noise. And I do like Josh Heupel as a coach in the direction of that program overall. That has been my SEC breakdown. I'll get into the SEC a little bit more, as well as the other conferences when I do my college football breakdown. That'll probably be in late August, since college football gets started Labor Day weekend. NFL starts the weekend after that, but can't wait for both the NFL and college football to start. Excited for the season. We're 50 days away from kickoff in the NFL, and we're less than 50. We're about 5 Saturdays away from the start of college football. Can't wait for either of those. The best time of year is college football and NFL season. Thank you again for watching and listening to the show. Again, this is Sports Talk on a Budget. It can basically be found audio version wise on anywhere you want to find your podcast, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you like to listen. And then again, if you prefer the video version, it is here on YouTube under Sports Talk on a Budget. Please like and subscribe right down here. Leave a comment if you'd like. But thank you again for watching and listening to the show, and have a great day.